So there is a secret to getting the green light to your ideas, your messages, and your content. And here it is. Or there was, you know what? There was supposed to be a music cue there, and it was going to be epic. But just imagine epic music right there, because it was awesome. But this is the secret, that we are all smart, capable, and good. Now, I'm actually serious about this, and there will be a quiz later, so remember this. Because if you don't, it could drive you insane, like this guy. This is Ignaz Semmelweis. Now, Semmelweis was alive in 1847 in Vienna. He was a doctor in a teaching hospital there. And this teaching hospital had 2 maternity wards. There was one for teaching doctors and one for teaching midwives. They wanted to keep the patient levels even, so they admitted women on alternating days. But the patient levels weren't even because of 2 reasons. One, women were doing everything possible to avoid one of the wards. And they were doing it because of the second reason. They were much more likely to die there. In fact, 1 in 5 women didn't make it out of one of the wards alive. But in the other ward, it was 1 in 50. They were much more likely to survive. Now, what was causing these deaths was something called childbed or puerperal fever. It was a blood infection. But what was causing it, and where did it come from? Especially since women were dying more often in the doctor's ward. But then one day, one of Semmelweis's fellow doctors dies of childbed fever. And I assure you that he had not just given birth. Now, what had happened was he had nicked his hand with a scalpel after performing an autopsy on one of the women that had died. And that gave Ignaz an idea, because only the doctors performed autopsies. So he wanted to try an experiment. But that experiment meant doing something a little different, because this was 50 years before germ theory. At the time, doctors at the height of the knowledge thought that disease was spread by giant sheeted skeletons, which was really just a representation of something they couldn't see. They called them miasmas, or bad air. And this bad air was detectable by bad smells. So the experiment was to wash the smell off of their hands. And it worked. The mortality rate plummets to match that of the midwives' ward. And Semmelweis declared the savior of mothers. He gave them a green light to life. Now, that's not the whole story. Because as hard as it may be to believe, Semmelweis's fellow doctors gave him a red light. For reasons I'll explain, they rejected him. They rejected his idea. They fire him. They stop washing their hands. The mortality rate goes back up. And Semmelweis, now, with nobody wanting or believing his idea, and the fate of all of those women now sealed, literally goes insane. And in a tragic finale to this, within 2 weeks of being committed to an insane asylum, he dies of a blood infection, just like those women he wanted to save. Now, far less dire, but we have Semmelweis moments like this all the time. Times when we want and need to get a green light to our ideas, our message, and our content, and we get red lights instead. Now, I have worked for smart, capable, and good companies for 20 years, and all of them experience these red lights. So see if some of these sound familiar to you. Okay, red light number 1, no attention. And that's where people don't act at all. You don't get a green light, nothing happens. And because this is pretty much our job in marketing, to get attention, like Semmelweis, it can be fatal. But it can also be fatal to our companies, like not just our jobs, but companies, because CB Insight says that the number 1 reason why startups fail is because there's no market need. Nobody wants it, or nobody believes they do. Now, red light number 2 is where they want what you have, but they don't want you, sorry to say. And so they give you a red light. They may give a green light to your competitor, which happens in B2B like 32% of the time. But the worst is that 21% of the time, they just shut the lights off and go home. They decide that nothing is better than what anybody else has to offer. Now, red light number 3, no confidence, also known as buyer's remorse, is when they want what you have, they even bought it from you, and then they start to question that decision, which means they start to question you. And I'm going to bet that somebody just popped into your mind because 40% of B2B purchase decisions, more than 40%, end with buyer's remorse. Now, has anyone here not seen one of these at their companies? Okay, good. So you're my people. Because I want to help. I believe I can. But first, we have to understand what is causing these red lights and the green lights in the first place. And that is your brain. Now, Harvard Business School professor Gerald Zaltman says that up to 95% of our decision-making is unconscious. Without you realizing it, when presented with new pieces of information, your brain is deciding on 3 things. Number 1, whether or not you want it. Number 2, whether or not you believe it. And number 3, whether or not it validates the other 2. Whether or not that new information is consistent with what you already want and believe. When you get those 3, it's like the green light goes on and it stays on, and you get that green light that we need as marketers, where people are willing to change, willing to act, willing to do something different. But too often, we don't get those green lights, we get the red lights. So let's talk about these 3, starting with this one. Now, it may seem kind of obvious that we always want to give people what they want, give the people what they want, but it doesn't always happen that way. But let me try this experiment, Semmelweis style. Okay, I need you to think of something that you really, really want right now. Maybe it's another cup of coffee, maybe it's a promotion, maybe it's abs of steel, I don't know. I pretty much want cake all the time. You may remember this from last year. And so I'm going to put that up. You could borrow my cake. All right, this is important. Here's how the experiment goes. I need you to think of something that you really, really want. You've got it in your mind? Now, unwanted. Did that work? No, of course it doesn't work, because we don't readily unwant things that we want, and it's easy to give the green light to those things. Now contrast that with trying to get someone like your kids to do something that they don't want to do, like eat their vegetables. Not so easy, right? But this is the same thing that happens when we tell people to just buy our stuff. We're saying, you should want this, and they're saying, no. Now, let's say they do want it. They have to believe that you will deliver on it. So, as an example, let's say that you are looking for a new SEO company, and you do your search on Google, and you find these guys, Best SEO Company 2019, and you find them exactly where you would expect to find the Best SEO Company 2019, on the 9th page of results. Do you believe them? No, you don't believe them, and they kind of know that, because if you click through, you're going to find this ringing endorsement that says, this is the best digital marketing agency I know. Now, that's a ringing endorsement. Let's see, who is it from? It's from Bob Proctor, renowned wealth expert and teacher of The Secret. Different secret. And Bob, I know that thoughts become things, but I think you could probably visualize yourself to something higher than the 9th page of results. You know, in a lot of ways, we need to remember this. In the words of mathematician Blaise Pascal, that people are generally better persuaded by the reasons which they themselves have discovered than by those which have come into the minds of others. In other words, we believe our own reasons, our own experiences most. For example, I live in Boston. I'm not from there, but I have lived there long enough to have a Bostonian alter ego named Karen O'Sullivan. Now, if you live in Boston, you are required to have an opinion on where you get the best lobster roll. And Karen will tell you that the best place to get it is actually not in Boston, but you have to drive an hour and 40 minutes north to this park outside of Portland, Fort Williams Park, and oh my God, there's a food truck there. It's the most amazing lobster roll you ever did frickin' see. It's like Tom Brady just smiled from above. Now, you know, she and I still want to try ones that are maybe closer to home, and so we do our research, and we found this one, Freshies. Now, it was voted the world's best lobster roll. All right, sounds pretty good. Karen's like, we got to go. So we start to explore, and we discover that Freshies is in Utah. Okay. Quick geography lesson here, because where are the lobsters? By the water. Utah, there's no water. And by the way, how fresh do you feel after flying 5 frickin' hours to Utah? All right, so we're going to believe that. Even if we want it, we're going to believe it when we eat it. And until then, Portland. Okay. Now, you may say to me, Tamsen, come on, I do things all the time that I do not want to do, and I have bought things that I did not believe would work. And I'm going to say, yeah, that's probably true. It was a very convincing infomercial. I'll give you that. But that's because there is a massive difference between action and change, between getting the green light to come on once and getting it to stay on. And while it might be tempting to think that the best way to create that change is to change what people want and believe, it turns out that the only way to create that long-term change is to leave those two unchanged, to validate what people already want and believe. And this is what our buddy Ignaz Semmelweis did not do. But just 10 years later, someone else did and got a very different result. Now, this time it's a woman, it's a nurse, and instead of caring for women in a maternity ward, she's caring for soldiers in the Crimean War. And the mortality rate is much higher. Not in battle, after it. That's what you see in the blue there. 9 out of 10 soldiers are dying of things like typhoid, dysentery. Things that we know now are caused by germs, bacteria, the cadaverous particles that Semmelweis thought was creating the bad smells in the first place. And while she, like Semmelweis, doesn't know about the germs, she does have the same theory about hand washing and sanitation. And not only does she get the green light from the doctors to wash their hands, she gets it to stay on, and they keep doing it. She's directly credited with reducing the mortality rate. She's directly credited with setting the foundations of modern nursing. As you probably have guessed, she is Florence Nightingale. So why did Nightingale succeed where Semmelweis failed? Because she validated the most important want and belief of all. You remember the secret to getting a green light? Because here it is. Music. This one, that we are smart, capable, and good. Now, I said this was important, and it is, because this is one of the most important basic human needs. We want to be smart, capable, and good. We believe we already are smart, capable, and good. And even if you don't believe that you're smart, capable, and good, you want to be seen as smart, capable, and good. Now, the problem is we don't always act smart, capable, and good. And this gap between I'm a good person who did a not good thing is one of the most physically, emotionally, mentally painful things that poor unconscious decision-making brain we've got can experience. It is so extraordinarily painful, in fact, that our brains will take extraordinary measures to relieve that pain. It will start to create stories that make that pain, that make that gap go away. Things like, well, that's not what I meant, or you must have misunderstood, or Janice left the M&Ms on our desk. What was I supposed to do? Leave them there. So actually, let's talk about that one, because I know that's a kind of story that I have told myself very, very often, and maybe you have too. So you'll do something like this. You'll work out today. Maybe you already have, and you really didn't want to. So clearly, that makes you a super good person, right? So that when you see those M&Ms, you're like, well, I am a super good person, so I deserve these M&Ms. Even though I, as a former Weight Watcher leader, will tell you that you have to walk the entire length of a football field to walk off the calories in just one. The workout ain't going to cut it, but your brain is like, no problem, we're super good, we're going to work out tomorrow. Like, this is not rational. Because we are not rational, and neither are your clients and customers. Humans are not rational decision makers. We are rationalizing decision makers. We create stories to justify what we do. And so you see what this means is that we don't do things because they're right. though we believe we do, we think the things we're doing are right because we are the ones doing them. Do you see this difference? Now, this rationalization, by the way, is completely and totally normal and human. I'd be worried about you if you didn't do it. The danger comes in not realizing that you do it, or not realizing that your clients and customers do it too. Because this rationalization is a trap. I like to call it the rat trap, because it is exactly where your content, your ideas, and your messages go to die. Because this is where people talk themselves out of change. And it's what's going on with these red lights. So with no attention, the story that you tell yourself, the rat trap is, I don't want it. With no decision, the rat trap is, well, I don't believe this is worth it, or I don't believe you can do it. With buyer's remorse, no confidence, the rat trap is, I don't believe that you are as smart and capable as I am, so I'm going to make your life a living hell. Now, this creates a big old problem, because too often the biggest source of this pain is us. The pain that we are introducing in our content and in our messages. In fact, we are taught to widen the gap between what people have and what we want them to have, which leads to messages like this one, where we say, well, your business is as unique as a fingerprint or a barcode, so why isn't your business insurance? Do you see what we're doing here? We're saying, well, you should want a thing that you don't know that you want, and oh, by the way, we're going to scold you for not wanting it. Well, what the? All right. Now, let's say this other situation also happens where we are so sure that people will want what we want them to want that we forget to tell them what it is that we want them to want, like this one, where we say, when thinking outside the box became the convention, we boxed ourselves in, box.com/boxed-in. All right, first, what does that even mean? Second, come on, people. I know we're marketers. Shh, nobody else is here, and we can tell each other that nobody follows those URLs except for marketers. Even more reason why it shouldn't go to a 404. Stop it. Oh. So we're trying to get people to want things that they don't want and trying to get them to unwant things that they do, and we're doing it by telling them stuff that they can't or won't believe, like Bob freaking Proctor. You know, it reminds me actually of like when I was growing up, dating myself here, and these sugary cereals would used to say that they were part of a balanced breakfast. Do you remember this? How many people? Right, okay. Hold up a sec. Does anybody notice something about this breakfast? That it is perfectly balanced without the cereal in it? Okay. No, that's okay, because remember, it was only part of a balanced breakfast. So in my day, #good old days, they used to put candy inside the sugar cereal. So, you know, to round out the breakfast, I'm just going to have that. And I'll see you on the football field later. Okay. So, but this happens also because we believe, the company believes what we're putting out there. And sometimes to fairly tragic consequences. So Boeing recently, with their 737 MAX 8, had not one but 2 planes crash because of faulty sensors and software systems. Now, after the first crash, when the public and even some governments no longer believed these planes were safe, Boeing released a statement that said they were completely airworthy, and even were after the first crash. Now, they're not doing this because they're lying or because they're evil. They're doing it because these are smart, capable, good people. Do you see? They can't imagine that they would have made something that wasn't also smart, capable, and good. And this is what happened with Semmelweis and his fellow doctors, even though he had the right answer that washing hands would save the women, because it so completely conflicted with what they believed to be true about the giant sheeted skeletons, but also because it conflicted with what they believed to be true about themselves, that they were gentlemanly and therefore clean, that they rejected this new information and therefore the idea. Now, Semmelweis's name lives on in psychology. There's actually something called the Semmelweis reflex, which is what happens when people reject new information simply because it conflicts with what they believe to be true. And I'm going to bet you just thought of some new people, too, that know that. Okay. So this is why, for all the reasons that we talked about, it is so dangerous for us to make people wrong, to invalidate what they want and believe, and yet we do it all the time. Now, like I said, I've been in brand and message strategy for a very long time, which means I've been very involved in trying to maintain brand standards. So even if you haven't sent a message like, please don't squish the logo or use our crappy PowerPoint template, you've probably received one. And you've probably received a message kind of like this. Now, I don't expect you to read this, but this is Kleenex basically saying, please refer to Kleenex as Kleenex brand tissue. And if it's in writing, with Kleenex R-Circle brand tissue. Because if you don't refer to it as Kleenex R-Circle brand tissue, like small children are going to die. Now, that's fine, right? This is familiar. We've all seen something like this. And this would be fine if it were internal message. But it wasn't. It was an ad that real people saw. Oh, but there's even entire sales methodologies built on pain. The Challenger sales methodology, for instance, talks about how we should expose the flaws and misinformation in a customer's current approach and present them with a better one. Do you see that that very approach means that we are introducing pain? And in fact, they sum up the whole methodology by saying we should make the pain of the status quo exceed the pain, exceed the pain of change. That is a lot of pain. You know what the worst part is? Who bears the brunt of this? You do. Shooting the messenger is real, y'all. Research shows over and over again that people do not like people who make them feel wrong. Do not like people who make them feel not smart, not capable, and not good. Just ask Ignaz. The doctors wanted to know why the women were dying. That's why they were doing the autopsies in the first place. And they believed they knew what was causing it. But because it went against what they thought, they wouldn't accept it. Now, you might be saying, but Tamsen, doesn't pain work? I mean, why were we taught this if it's not right? Well, here's the thing. Pain does work. I mean, economist Daniel Kahneman won a Nobel Prize for saying that losses loom larger than gains. And he's right. Research shows over and over again that we are more motivated to act in the short term to avoid the pain of losing $5 than we are by the potential joy of finding $5. We're more motivated to act in the short term. Remember, there's a huge difference between action and change. So let's think about pain for a minute, actually, because I want you to think about how you learned not to touch a hot stove once upon a time. By touching it, right? And did you keep touching it? No, because it hurt. Your unconscious brain acted out of pain, and then your conscious brain kept you from doing it again. Which means pain is the enemy of sustained action. You will not keep your hand on the burner. Pain is the enemy of long-term change. You will not continue to do something that is physically, emotionally, and mentally painful for you to do. I mean, Whole30 is 30 days for a reason. Oh my God, because it sucks. After 5 days, you're willing to trade in your firstborn for a frickin' lick of a lobster roll, even if it is from Utah. Utah, I love you, I do. Okay. All right, but this is a lesson I learned incredibly powerfully when I was a Weight Watchers leader. Now, this is me now, hopefully, obviously, but this was me 20 years ago on cake. Now, I eventually learned how to lose weight with cake. I wanted to pay that forward. So in addition to my full-time branding and messaging job, I had another one. Up to 5 times a week, my job was to help people create a long-term change that their rational brain wanted and their rationalizing brain did not. And though there are a lot of reasons why people are and are not successful with losing weight long-term, there was something that tended to be consistent in the people who were successful, and it was this. They wanted to lose weight because they believed they already were smart, capable, and good. And that meant that all the activities that they needed to do to lose weight were consistent with, they validated those two beliefs. Losing weight was the right thing to do based on who they saw themselves to be. And counterintuitively, the people who struggled were the people who wanted to lose weight because they believed they would become smart, capable, and good when they lost the weight. which means, no, it doesn't make rational sense, but it meant that all the activity associated with losing weight was wrong because it was inconsistent with how they saw themselves to be. It violated their self-perception now. And this is, again, the same thing that Ignaz experienced, because when he basically said to the other doctors, you know what, you will be smart, capable, and good when you wash your hands. You know, the women are dying. I'm pretty sure it's your fault because you're dirty. So, you know, dudes, clean yourself up. Didn't work because it violated what they already thought about themselves. Either they were wrong or he was. And really, all change requires this battle of beliefs. We cannot hold in our heads two opposing things that we believe to be true. And when this battle royale happens, when those two truths fight, only one of them can win. It's just how our brains work. But remember that we always believe our own beliefs, our own experiences, our own reasoning most. Which means that there's one belief that, when brought into play, always wins. And you already know what it is. It's this one, that we are smart, capable, and good. And this is what Nightingale got so right. She knew what the doctors wanted to save the soldiers' lives. She knew what they believed, that they were at the top of the food chain when it came to knowledge and I cannot say that word, gentlemanliness and cleanliness. And so here's what she did that was so magical. She positioned the new information and the new behavior in a way that was consistent with both of those things. She had the nurses wash the doctor's hands. So being clean, doctor's job. Getting clean, nurse's job. Do you see what she did? She supplied a story that strengthened the strongest belief of all, that the doctors were already smart, capable, and good. And if you in your own life have sustained some kind of change where you started by doing something you really didn't want to do, like stop smoking, lose weight, maintain an exercise regimen, it's likely because your brain did something like that for you too. It supplied a stronger story. One that was consistent with the smart, capable, good person you already saw yourself to be. And in fact, it strengthened some aspect of you that you felt was even more smart, more capable, and more good. Like you wanted to be more of a better parent than a smoker. So this is why it's so important that when you're thinking about your clients and customers, that you've got to ask yourself, are you a Semmelweis or are you a Nightingale? Because that is the worst hashtag ever, I got to tell you. But this is important because if you think about it, are you a Semmelweis where you're basically saying through your content, through your messages, that you will be smart, capable, and good when you buy our stuff? Or are you, like Nightingale, strengthening the story of how they are already smart, capable, and good? Do your messages flow like this, where you're saying, well, buy our stuff because, you know, you're doing it wrong. Believe us, so buy our stuff. Because that is a red light Semmelweis message. Or do your messages flow in such a way that they start with what your clients want and believe and build from there? Like this one. Now, this is one of my clients' human workplaces. And they say things like, you know, a lot of companies wonder, how can you get more from your team? And there's a lot of solutions out there that makes it confusing, especially because people use the words happy and engaged interchangeably. I mean, for good reason, because they are related. But happiness isn't what drives engagement. Success does. Our research shows that success drives engagement, not happiness. So, if you want happier, engaged employees, solve for success. Here's how you can do that. Here's how we can help. Do you feel the difference? Because that's the difference that our buddy Blaze was talking about. That's the difference of using their reasoning to validate yours. We're flipping the script on that. And here's the thing. We have all experienced, we have all probably given buyer's remorse. But there is no such thing as believer's remorse. So you may say to me, Tamsen, you know what? We just need to make our short-term numbers. That's all we're looking for is action. Great. Want to get some action? Bring the pain. Maybe pick up some Green M&Ms and save it for role-playing night, but we're just, okay. But if you want to sustain that action, if you want to create that long-term change, then like Nightingale, we need to relieve the pain of that change and that decision at every moment possible. Which means we can't just build the case that we want to make, because that's based on our wants and our beliefs. We need to build their case, the one that they would tell themselves, the one where they're already smart, capable, and good. Now, that case has a name. The Swedish call it the red thread. I came up with a process to help you find it, so I call it the red thread R-circle. You don't have to. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. But if you want to start building this for yourself, then I've put the steps for you together in a worksheet that you can download. And I've also put there the highlights and the notes from this presentation to save that for you, and so that you can go back to the office and share it yourselves. Because it's no secret that we not only want these green lights, we need them. But the pain that we've been using to create those green lights, they may create action, but they're not creating change. Because that kind of pain violates the secret to getting the green light, that we are smart, capable, and good. That pain is the enemy of long-term change. So if you want your content, your ideas, and your messages to escape that rat trap of rationalization, be a Nightingale. Relieve their pain. Build their case, the one that makes them smart, capable, and good already. Find the red thread that ties together what they want, what they believe, and what makes them right. And not only will you get the green light to come on, it'll stay on. And that feels pretty smart, capable, and good. I'm Tamsen Webster and Karen O'Sullivan. Save a life, wash your hands. Thank you very much.